The Reconquista Initiative presents Microaggressions are about power and control. In recent years, the idea of a microaggression has eked into the mainstream of society, while at the same time, this idea has flooded many of the college campuses from which it originated. Now, a microaggression is, allegedly, defined as a small and even unconscious bias or prejudice that one person, of course, nearly always a white, heterosexual, Christian, and/or Western male, makes against another person in his speech or behavior. So it is, essentially, a word or action that is so innocuous that it would not appear biased or prejudiced to most normal people, and yet it actually is. Now, the latter point is a red flag in and of itself. But what is particularly suspicious about microaggressions is that quite often, or so the proponents of microaggressions tell us, neither the individual causing the microaggression nor the individual being microaggressed actually know that they are involved in a microaggressing interaction. And thus only an outside observer, an expert in microaggressions, if you will, can see the microaggression in action. Consequently, to the proponents of microaggressions, though neither party directly involved in the alleged interaction felt aggressed in any way, an outside third party could still allege that a microaggression occurred and take action against the offending party based on that allegation. Now, though many decent but ignorant people may think, merely upon hearing the term microaggression, that stopping such a thing is a good and noble task, for stopping any type of unnecessary aggression is a good, it must be absolutely clear that the ultimate intent of this idea is not about minimizing aggression, but rather it is about power. Indeed, the dark truth concerning microaggressions is that they are fundamentally about power and control over individuals who disagree with the left. And to understand why this is the case, consider these 5 factors that are linked to the idea of microaggressions. First, note that to the proponents of microaggressions, such aggressions, though micro in nature, are still counted as aggressions, which to such people are the equivalent of actual violence or threats, and thus require policing of some type in order to stop. Second, a person might be committing a microaggression and yet have absolutely no idea that he is committing it. Third, the receiver of an alleged microaggression might not even know or realize that he is receiving such an aggression. Fourth, microaggressions often require third parties to advise people of their microaggressions. And finally, fifth, the term microaggression is itself so vague, amorphous, and flexible that essentially anything could be construed as a microaggression to someone. Thus, when you have an idea which is composed of the 5 points above, you suddenly have, in principle, a recipe where the creation of microaggression commissars can be justified. After all, is it not a moral good to curb aggression if that aggression is deemed to be the equivalent of violence and threats? At the same time, you also have a situation where such microaggression commissars can suddenly bear down on almost anything a person says or does that is culturally or socially relevant. For anything even remotely controversial can be construed as a microaggression in some way. And In fact, we are seeing this very type of action occurring on some college campuses today, with right-wing and conservative speakers being shouted down due to their words and ideas, as well as their mere presence allegedly being considered hate speech which could trigger someone. And so, in this way, the proponents of microaggressions could use this idea to control a person's speech and behavior by simply claiming that the person is committing an unconscious microaggression which that person needs to cease committing. Furthermore, for some people, the fear of microaggressing, for those who let themselves fear such a thing, will eventually cause such people to self-censor not only their own speech, but even their very way of thinking. For the moment that they think an allegedly incorrect thought, they will stop themselves both out of an ill-placed guilt for thinking such things and out of caution for what could happen if their incorrect thoughts became public. Thus, for people in circumstances where allegations of microaggressions are common, and for people who might have something to lose if they are accused of a microaggression, such as college professors, we can thus see how such people could slowly but surely concede their power and autonomy to the new political priestly caste of microaggression perceivers. And they will have done so not through their own reason, but through the subtle coercion of social and cultural pressures that make many weaker men bend the knee to the sins of their times. Finally, not only can we see how microaggressions are a tool for control, but we can also understand how they are a tool for control in a specific direction, namely, a tool for control of the right and traditionalists by the left and by progressives. But how do we know this? Because you are a fool if you think that any socio-cultural critique or insult made against the right or traditionalism or against white Western males would ever be considered a microaggression. And yet, by contrast, any socio-cultural critique or insult made by the right or by traditionalists or by white Western males against their opponents would always be considered microaggression worthy. And so it is the double standard that the champions of microaggressions employ, which gives the game away as being one where the left is always a victim of microaggressions and the right is always the aggressor. And so the long and short of it is this. The core purpose of the idea of microaggressions is as a tool to allow others to exercise power over you, and to do so in a way that literally makes you and your mind begin to shape itself into the very intellectual and political mold that the modern-day social justice warrior desires. And there could be no hell worse than that. As such, fight this idea of microaggressions at every turn. And if someone tells you that you have committed a microaggression, then feel free to commit a second one by telling that person to screw off. Now, as always, please subscribe to this channel and support it on Patreon or through PayPal. Thank you.